Virgo, you already knew. Not in the way you can prove, not in the way that holds up in a conversation where someone asks you to explain yourself. Not with evidence, not with dates, not with a clear sequence of events you can lay out cleanly on a table. But you knew, in that place that doesn't use words, that registers things before the mind has caught up, that has been quietly, persistently, inconveniently certain about something, while everything around you insisted you were imagining it. And tonight we're talking about what it means when the thing you knew, the thing you were told was paranoia, overthinking, insecurity, too much sensitivity, walks into the room and sits down and says out loud exactly what you felt in your bones all along. Let's go in. There is a particular violence in being made to doubt what you know. Not physical, but real. The kind that leaves marks in places that don't show, in the way you hesitate before trusting yourself, in the way you add qualifiers to your own certainty. I think, maybe, I could be wrong, perhaps I'm reading too much into it, until the original signal is buried under so many layers of self-doubt that you can barely hear it anymore. That erosion didn't happen all at once. It happened in small moments. A dismissal here, a redirection there, a look that said you're doing this again without a single word being spoken, a pattern of your observations being met with explanations so reasonable, so calm, so perfectly constructed that the unreasonable sounding one in the room started to feel like you. And slowly, quietly, without fully realizing it was happening, you started to manage your own knowing, to keep it smaller, to bring it out only when you were alone, in the dark, in the private space where no one could tell you that you were wrong again. The echo. Your intuition, when it goes unnamed for long enough, when it's been dismissed enough times, starts to sound like an echo instead of a voice, bouncing off walls, returning to you distorted until you're not sure anymore whether what you're hearing is signal or just the sound of your own anxiety cycling through the same loop. That confusion between real knowing and anxious noise is one of the loneliest places a person can live, because you can't fully trust yourself and you can't fully let go. So you hover in that uncertain middle space, half believing, half doubting, exhausted by the constant negotiation between what you feel and what you're allowed to say you feel. You weren't crazy to live in that tension. The tension was real. The tension was created, and the fact that you held on to the thread of your own knowing, even when it was thin, even when you almost let it go completely, that says something about you that matters. Let me talk about the one who kept the secret, the one who is coming now with something to say, the one who has been carrying a truth in a locked room inside themselves, knowing that you knew on some level and choosing silence anyway. There are different reasons people hold confessions, and none of them are simple. Sometimes it's fear, the fear of what happens when the truth lands, of the rearranging it requires, of being seen in full, not the curated version, not the version that holds things together, but the actual version with all its contradictions and failures and moments of choosing wrong. Sometimes it's shame. That particular interior weather that makes honesty feel like exposure rather than release. That makes the truth feel like a weapon pointed at the self rather than a bridge towards something real. And sometimes, and this is the one that complicates everything, it's love. A misguided, poorly expressed, ultimately damaging form of love, but love nonetheless. The belief that keeping you from the truth was the same as protecting you from pain, the confusion of withholding with sheltering, understanding which one it is, doesn't happen in the first wave. It requires the water to settle. It requires you to be in a place steady enough to hear not just what they say, but what lives underneath what they say. Hold on. I need to slow down here because something important is coming through. When a confession arrives, when someone finally says the thing that confirms what you felt, there is a sequence of feelings that almost no one talks about honestly. The first is vindication. That rush of, I knew it, that relief of being right after so long being made to feel wrong. That is real. Feel it. It belongs to you. But underneath the vindication, arriving just behind it, quieter and heavier, is grief. Because being right about the thing you feared is never only a victory. It is also a confirmation of every moment you were in the dark. Every time you reached for reassurance and received a lie dressed as comfort. Every time your own clarity was used against you, turned into evidence of your instability rather than your perception. The grief of confirmed intuition is its own particular weight, not the grief of losing something. The grief of realizing how long you carried the right answer while being told the question wasn't worth asking. And then, underneath the vindication and the grief, there is something else, something that arrives last in the quiet after everything else has moved through. A reckoning with yourself, because the confession doesn't only reveal something about them, it reveals something about you, about how long you stayed inside a version of reality that wasn't fully real, about the moments you chose the comfortable explanation over the uncomfortable knowing, about the times your intuition spoke clearly and you found a reason, a good reason, a reasonable reason to set it aside. Not because you were weak, but because the truth was costly, because knowing would have required acting, and acting would have required losing something you weren't ready to lose. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes we choose the half-truth we can live inside over the full truth that would require us to rebuild everything from the ground up. That is human. That is not a flaw. That is the cost of caring about something enough to be afraid of losing it. The labyrinth. There is a particular corridor in the labyrinth of this kind of relationship. The one where you knew but didn't say, where they knew you knew and neither of you named it. That corridor has a specific atmosphere, heavy, warm in the wrong way, like a room where too many things have been left unsaid for too long and the air has thickened around them. You've been breathing that air. For however long this has been going on, adapting your lungs to it, telling yourself the heaviness was normal because you'd lived in it long enough to forget what different felt like. The confession, when it comes, is like a window opening, not comfortable necessarily. The fresh air can sting, particularly if the room has been sealed for a very long time. But it is air, real air, the kind that comes from outside the story you've been living inside. And once a window opens, once the sealed room has breathed, it is very difficult to go back to pretending it was never sealed. I want to talk about what you do with this, not as instruction, not as a map, but as an invitation to look at a few things clearly. The first is trust. Not trust in them. That's a separate conversation, one only you can have with yourself in the quiet. But trust in yourself, because one of the most lasting damages of having your intuition dismissed, of being made to doubt your own perception for long enough, is that the distrust doesn't stay contained to that one relationship. It spreads, it seeps into how you approach everything, into how quickly you second guess yourself, into how readily you defer to someone else's version of reality when it contradicts your own. The confession is not just confirmation of what you felt about the situation. It is confirmation that your instrument works, that the thing that reads situations, that quiet, accurate, inconvenient interior knowing, was functioning correctly all along, that it can be trusted, that it was always worth trusting. The cinder, some of you have been living so long in the ash of a version of things that wasn't fully true, building your days around a story with a gap in the center, a missing piece everyone agreed not to name, is less than #0. 5# is greater than that. You forgot what it felt like to stand in something solid, something real all the way through, without the gap, without the careful avoidance of the part that doesn't hold up. The confession burns away the last of the pretense. And yes, what burns is uncomfortable. But what's left, the ground underneath the ash, the actual foundation beneath the story that couldn't hold, that is real, that is yours to build on. That belonged to you before any of this. Fire clarifies. It removes what was only held together by habit, by silence, by the mutual agreement not to look too closely. What remains after fire is what was always actually there. I'm not sure why, but this feels important to say right now. The confirmation of your intuition is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the honest one. Because you can only build something real on a real foundation. And for however long this has been carrying an unspoken thing at its center, there was a limit to how real it could become. A ceiling it kept hitting, a depth it couldn't reach. Now the thing is named. Now it is in the room. Now both of you, or however many are in this, are standing in the same reality for the first time. And from that shared reality, however uncomfortable, however disorienting, something honest becomes possible. Whether you want to build something from that honesty is less than #0. 5# is greater than whether the foundation that remains after the pretense burns is one you want to stand on. Only you can know that. That is not a decision for right now, in the first wave. That is a decision for the quiet, for the settled water, for the version of you that is no longer in shock. We're near the end. And I want to close with the thing that matters most tonight. Not the confession, not what it means for them or for the situation or for what comes next, but you're knowing, that quiet, accurate, dismissed, doubted, buried, persistent, undestroyable signal that was right. That has always been right. That will continue to be right if you let it. If you stop managing it, if you stop apologizing for it, if you stop shrinking it to fit inside the comfort of people who find it inconvenient, your intuition is not a problem. It never was. It was the most accurate thing in the room, in a room full of people pretending otherwise. Trust it. Going forward, in the next room, in the next connection, in every moment when something speaks quietly from that deep place and the surface of things says you're imagining it, you are not imagining it. You never were. Take what resonates tonight, leave what doesn't. Your discernment, that precise, hard-earned, battle-tested discernment, is the only thing you ever needed. 2 questions for the quiet, or for the comments, if something moved in you tonight. When was the first moment you actually knew before you allowed yourself to know? And what did you do with that feeling? And what would change in how you move through the world if you decided from this moment to stop arguing with your own knowing? Sit with those gently, without rushing. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.